Okay, transcendentalism. That's how you say that. Transcendentalism. Transcendentalism. Okay, this is a brief overview. For a lot of people, this is one of the most difficult of all the literary movements to understand. So I'm going to do my best to explain it in a way that you can. It is distinctly American. It developed in the Romantic period before the Civil War, and it is based very much on founding principles of the United States: individualism, the idea that you can make your own way in the world and make your own choices, and that your own personal thoughts and feelings are more important than what society says. So, let's see if it'll work. So there are 5 underlying principles, and you're going to want to fill in your guided notes as you do this, so that you can then pass the ed puzzle, okay? So, nonconformity. A nonconformity means you don't go along with what people say and what society tells you. It's a belief that we must reject custom and tradition and must forge new paths. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to reject everything society has to offer. At this time, there were very strict gender roles. Women were to get married and have children. Men were to go off and be good providers, all those sorts of things. If you, as a woman, decided you didn't want to get married and have children, that was fine. That, under this principle, that would be nonconformity. However, if you decided what you truly wanted in your heart for yourself was to get married and have children, that was fine as well. It was all about not giving in to society's pressures simply because society says that's what you must do. So there's a lot of people today who talk about how everybody should go to college, everybody should study STEM, everybody should do this, everybody should do that. And if that is not the path that's best for you, you shouldn't conform to that expectation. Okay, number 2, self-reliance and individualism. It's the belief that the highest authority is oneself. This is very, very important, the self-reliance and individualism. It basically means that your own beliefs are the things that should guide you, and that they take greater precedence even than what governments or society say you must do. This is also tied very heavily to what's called civil disobedience, and you would know this from the civil rights movement, most likely, from Martin Luther King Jr. It's what John Lewis, who was involved in the Selma March and the civil rights movement for decades, and then was also a representative in Congress. He just died recently. He called it good trouble, okay, that you needed to get into good trouble. It is the idea that if you believe a law is immoral or unjust, then it is your job, it is your responsibility to break that law. Now, there's a caveat to that. You're going to break that law knowing full well that society is going to punish you for it. So you might end up in jail, okay? And you accept that as part of being a member of society. So the civil disobedience is that we are responsible for not following or breaking unjust laws and accepting the punishment. And part of it is to teach other people and bring to light to other people that you're being punished for this thing that is immoral, okay? So the self-reliance and individualism, the highest authority is yourself, your own beliefs and morality. And it's also founded in the idea that people are inherently good. So when left to make decisions for themselves, that they will choose the higher road, that they'll do the right thing, not that they'll turn into, serial killers or something like that. Okay, so third principle, feeling and intuition. The belief that intuition and emotions are better roads to knowledge than rational thought. Now, rational thought is relying on logos, relying on facts, relying on experts, relying on provable things and logical decision-making process. Now, feelings, intuition is that gut feeling you get. Transcendentalists believe that making decisions and discovering the world was better based on those feelings and intuitions, those gut feelings. I'm sure all of you at some point in your life have been in a situation where your gut's telling you, I should not be here, I should not be a part of that. Whereas your mind may be saying, no, I want to be at this party, or I want to be driving in this car, or I want to be doing that because I want to fit in society, Whereas they're saying you should listen to that gut feeling, okay? And that is what you should guide your actions more than any sort of logic, okay? Come on. Okay, number 4, confidence in the abilities of man. Okay, again, this goes back to the belief that humankind are inherently good. It shows optimism and trust that man can solve all problems and difficulties. So essentially, that we as human beings there's nothing we can't overcome as long as we put our heart and our gut into it and we try, okay? We can solve any problem that exists. We can deal with any situation that arises. That's part of Transcendentalism. Not the idea that left to our own devices, we will do that, not be crippled by a problem, okay? And then this last one, 5. This is the one people have the hardest time with. And part of that's because they see it as being very foreign to their own either religious upbringing or whatever it may be, or even atheist upbringing, whatever it happens to be, agnostic, whatever. So understanding this concept is key, okay, to understanding Transcendentalism and a lot of the things we're going to be reading. It has to do with the importance of nature. Everything is a reflection of the divine soul, or what Emerson calls the oversoul. Before we go in too deep, you need to understand what the divine soul is. Divine means godly, okay? Now, are they strictly Christians? No. There were Transcendentalists who were raised in other religions. But what all of them believed is that everything that is alive has a soul. And that soul is divine. So you can think of it as that spark of life. My lights just went off. Hold on. The spark of life, the thing that gives us life, that gives us the ability to think, that gives us the ability to exist and grow and change, is the divine soul. And that soul, that spark of life, is godly in its own way. And so you can think of it as, the human soul ascending to heaven. It never disappears. It just goes on to the next, plane of existence. But that divine soul also exists in nature. So it exists in trees. It exists in grass. It exists in anything that's alive, okay? Not in, a plain piece of wood. or a desk or a chair, but in nature, in animals, that spark of life, that thing that makes them living, is a reflection of the divine, okay, or the divine soul. And nature is used as a doorway to the spiritual world, because nowhere can you find more of this divine soul around you than if you step out into nature, where everything is living, breathing, changing, okay? So it doesn't necessarily conflict with religion. It's just a different idea of what life and what the soul is. I always think of it as when I was a little kid and I stopped believing in Santa Claus. My mother explained to me about the Christmas spirit. And the Christmas spirit was that feeling of warmth and compassion and love and giving that you have during the holiday season. The divine soul is like that. It's like that sense of worth. It's that candle burning inside, that spark that connects you to all things and all people. Okay, so those are the 5 main principles of Transcendentalism. the goal of transcendentalists, you're going to be moving on to the next part of your notes here, is to find a higher truth. And that higher truth is not what society says. It's not what your parents say. It's not what the advertisements on the television say. It is solely dependent on themselves, solely dependent on you. Okay? What is your higher truth? You can think of it as almost like, what is your purpose? What is your reason for being alive? What is the thing that guides you? That's your higher truth. And in order to find that truth, you have to transcend the physical world. Now, they're not saying, you leave your body and you go on a, spiritual journey. No. They believed that the physical things that we own and possess, we get caught up in society, in consumerism, in having things. And so we work really, really hard every day, and we go to a job usually we hate. If you're lucky enough not to have a job you hate, I love my job, but a lot of people don't. But they go because they want to earn the money so that they can buy the things, okay? So they believed you needed to forget about those things. Should you do away with all possessions? No. But you shouldn't, your world and your higher truth and your purpose in life should not revolve around those physical things. It should go beyond that. For Walt Whitman, that meant he did a little experiment where he left the city and he went and he lived in a little shack, little cottage on Walden Pond. And he had the basic necessities, and don't let him fool you. His friends brought him stuff, okay? But he lived in touch with nature, and he spent his days contemplating things, staring at a blade of grass, watching animals do their thing. And through that, he tried to do away with the dependence on physical possessions and think more about what his higher truth was, what his purpose was. Okay, so the early influences here, okay, Plato, going all the way back to Greece, where he would examine very long thought pieces on what is truth and what is beauty, what is reality. And it's that sort of higher thinking, not why is that chair the way it is, or, ooh, can I buy that? It's what is the nature of truth? What is the nature of beauty? What are these things? What is reality? Okay, and they also believed in the notion of perfecting themselves. An example of this is Ben Franklin. He was pre-transcendentalist, but the idea of perfecting oneself. Ben Franklin very, very, very much followed this. He had, from the time he was a small boy, he had a little book, and he would create almost checklists for himself. And so every day he had to do these things, and it was crazy. The number of things that he had to do in a day, every day, was just nuts. But it was, exploring and learning and practicing and trying new things and bettering himself. But transcendentalists are less methodical than Ben Franklin and his checklists. Okay, it's more intuitive. The idea that the things that your conscience and your gut and your emotions tell you are good things, that you continue to work on that. The goals that you set for yourself, that you continue to strive towards them. Okay? And there you go. That is a brief overview of Transcendentalism. So next week, when we dig into the poetry, we'll have a little bit better idea of where it's coming from. And I'm going to be honest, these poems are going to be tough to understand, but we're going to go through them together. So have a good weekend and get your notes done and turned in.